Summary hook. He thought it was just a 5-yard sale bike for his son, a rusty frame, a chipped handlebar. Nothing special. But what a struggling single dad didn't know was that this bike had once belonged to the missing son of a tech billionaire. What followed wasn't just a search for answers, but a discovery that would link two broken families in the most unexpected way. Stay with us, because what begins as a simple act of kindness turns into a story of connection, second chances, and a miracle hiding in plain sight. Opening 300 words. The morning air still clung to a hint of spring chill as Elijah Ross zipped up his hoodie, fingers calloused from the night shift at the mill. Saturday was supposed to be for sleep, but sleep didn't come easy when your kid needed new shoes, and the electric bill sat unpaid on the kitchen table. Across the cracked windshield of his pickup, sun filtered through budding trees, and Elijah spotted a makeshift sign nailed to a light pole. Yard sale, today only. He wasn't planning on stopping, but then he saw it, a scuffed-up kid's bike leaning against a wooden crate full of old tools. Red frame, bent spoke, handlebar grips half melted by the sun. Nothing fancy, but Elijah could already see the look on his son's face. $5. That's all the woman asked, barely glancing up from the paperback in her lap. She didn't seem interested in making conversation. Said the bike came from her nephew's storage unit. Take it, she added with a shrug. We just want the space. Elijah didn't ask questions. He handed her a crumpled 5 and loaded the bike into his truck bed, thinking only of his 9-year-old, Toby, who'd outgrown his tricycle last summer. But when he got home, Toby froze. His wide blue eyes scanned the bike, then flicked to his dad with something between awe and fear. Dad, he whispered, tracing a faded sticker on the frame. This looks just like the one from the missing boy poster. The one from the news. Elijah's stomach tightened. He brushed it off with a laugh. But that night, long after Toby fell asleep, he searched the boy's name. What he found sent a chill through his chest and lit a fire that would change their lives forever. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, the flickering light above humming with every gust of wind outside. His laptop was old, the keys half stuck with syrup or time, but it worked. And the story popped up almost immediately. Oliver Ramsey Jr., age 8, missing since September. There it was, a school photo of a boy with sandy brown hair, one front tooth missing, and a smile too wide to forget. Elijah stared at the photo, then looked at the bike propped against the kitchen wall. It wasn't identical, but it was close. Too close. The red frame, the chipped black grips, even the sticker on the side. A faded logo of a tech startup Elijah didn't recognize. But one mentioned in the article, it was like staring at a ghost. He kept telling himself it had to be coincidence. Kids' bikes all looked similar, right? But the more he read, the harder it got to believe in chance. The boy had vanished from a gated park in Palo Alto while his nanny took a phone call. His bike had gone missing too. No suspects, no ransom, no sign of struggle. The story faded out like most do, cold case, hopeful quotes from a devastated family, and a few blurry surveillance stills that led nowhere. But Elijah couldn't look away. He clicked through page after page until a name jumped out at him, Carson Tech, the company the boy's father owned. And there it was again, that same cracked sticker on the bike in his kitchen. By sunrise, Elijah had made a decision. He called the local police, gave them the address, explained what he'd found, then sat back with shaking hands. Not because he was scared of getting in trouble, he hadn't done anything wrong, but because something told him this was bigger than him. When the officers arrived later that morning, they were cautious, took the bike into evidence, asked a few questions, jotted notes in a pad like it was routine. But Elijah could tell from the way their eyebrows rose, how one of them leaned in for a closer look at the sticker, that this wasn't routine at all. They told him not to expect anything. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe it was just a strange fluke. But Elijah felt it in his bones. This meant something. That evening, he sat Toby down, told him when the bike was with the police now, that it might be important to someone else. Toby didn't cry. He just nodded, then asked, "Do you think the boy will get to come home now?" Elijah didn't know what to say. He wished he had the kind of certainty his son carried like sunlight. "I hope so," he said finally. "I really do." 2 days later, everything changed. Elijah was back at the mill, stacking lumber for a late order. When his phone rang, unknown number, he almost didn't answer. But something told him to pick up. The voice on the other end was calm, clipped, and oddly formal. A man named Gregory Lang, head of security for Carson Tech, said they'd received a call from local law enforcement and were interested in verifying the chain of events. Elijah barely understood half of what the man said, too many corporate terms and polished words, but he understood enough. They wanted to meet in person that night. As he tucked Toby in, Elijah couldn't stop thinking about it, about the billionaire in California, the boy who vanished, and the bike that somehow landed in their tiny Montana town. He looked at his son, curled under a dinosaur blanket, and whispered a quiet promise to himself. No matter what happens next, he would protect Toby, even from the truth. If it came to that, the knock came just after 9 p.m. "Mom." A sleek black SUV idled outside the trailer, its engine humming like a thing alive. Elijah opened the door slowly, his shoulders tense beneath a flannel shirt still dusted with sawdust from the mill. The man on the other side looked like he'd stepped out of another world. Pressed gray suit, polished shoes, no smile. "Mr. Ross?" the man asked. "Gregory Lang. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us." Elijah nodded, unsure of what to say. Lang stepped inside, followed by a woman in a navy coat who introduced herself as Detective Morales from San Jose. She wasn't with the local force. No one said it out loud, but Elijah knew this wasn't small town anymore. This was big, bigger than anything he'd ever brushed against. They sat at the kitchen table, where a half-finished plate of macaroni still sat from Toby's dinner. Lang pulled out a folder. Photos, documents, a copy of the missing person flyer Elijah had seen online. The sticker on the frame, Morales said, tapping one image, that tech logo, it was from a limited run. Only 20 of those bikes were produced. All were given to top executives at Carson Tech. One went missing with Oliver. Elijah swallowed hard. The weight of what he'd stumbled into settled on his chest. "So, it really could be his?" he asked. Morales nodded. "It's not just possible, it's likely." Then Lang leaned in, his tone shifting from neutral to something warmer, more human. "Mr. Ross, Oliver's father, Rowan Ramsey, he hasn't stopped looking. He sends out feelers, rewards, private investigators. This is the first solid lead in over 2 years." Elijah's hands curled into fists on the table. Not from fear, but from the quiet realization that a simple act, a $5 bike, was now tethered to a family's desperate hope. They asked more questions. When he bought the bike, from whom, what the seller said. Elijah told them everything, including the part about the woman at the yard sale. Morales made a note to track her down. This could help narrow the window of time. She said, "Figure out how the bike traveled from California to here." When they finally stood to leave, Lang paused at the door. "There's a chance Mr. Ramsey may want to speak with you directly," he said. "He values discretion, but he's a father, and you may be the first real link he's had to his son in a long time." Elijah nodded, his mind already racing. After they left, the night felt heavier, like the sky itself was leaning in. He checked on Toby, who was still asleep, one arm flung over his favorite stuffed bear, unaware that his bike might change the fate of a billionaire's broken heart. The next morning, Elijah drove to work like usual, But every passing tree and roadside sign felt sharper, more alive. He couldn't stop thinking about Oliver, about where the boy might be, if he was even still out there. And then the strangest thought hit him. What if someone else knew? What if someone had been hiding this all along? At the lunch break, he called the number Lang had left a voicemail offering to help however he could. Not because he was hoping for a reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. A missing kid, a hurting father, a mystery that somehow landed in his backyard. Later that night, as Elijah sat by the window sipping black coffee, his phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He answered it on the second ring. Mr. Ross. The voice on the other end was calm but full of unspoken emotion. This is Rowan Ramsey. I hear you found my son's bike. Elijah didn't know what to say. For once in his life, words failed. All he could offer was honesty. Yes, sir, he said quietly. I think I did. And on the other end of the line, a billionaire father exhaled like maybe, just maybe, hope was finally coming home. Rowan Ramsey didn't sound like a billionaire. His voice was soft, deliberate, edged with the kind of exhaustion Elijah recognized all too well. The weight of grief doesn't care how much money you have. It sits in the chest the same way. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes that first call. Rowan asked about the bike, about the sticker, about Toby, not with suspicion, but with an ache that made every question feel personal. He loved that bike, Rowan said quietly. Used to ride it down our driveway every morning before school. Called it his rocket. Elijah pictured Toby doing the same, racing up and down the gravel lane behind their trailer, laughter trailing like a kite string behind him. He hadn't known, but somehow the boy had. That weekend, another black SUV pulled into their yard. This time, Rowan Ramsey stepped out. He didn't bring press or security detail, just himself, tall, neatly dressed, though the lines on his face told the story of sleepless nights and too many what-ifs. Elijah met him halfway across the lawn. Mr. Ramsey, he began, but Rowan held up a hand. Please, just Rowan. For a moment, the two men stood there, not as rich and poor, not as anything but fathers. And then Rowan's eyes drifted to the porch, where Toby stood, watching curiously. That's your boy? He asked. Elijah nodded. Toby. Rowan smiled faintly. He looks about the age Oliver would be now. They sat inside, the bike still in the hands of police for analysis. Rowan didn't seem to care. You ever just know something? He asked, eyes scanning the small living room like he was memorizing the space. The way that bike showed up here, it wasn't coincidence. I know it's his. I know it. Elijah didn't argue. He wasn't the kind of man to believe in fate or divine timing, but even he had to admit, it felt like something bigger was at work. Toby came in quietly, sat beside his dad, and eyed Rowan with cautious curiosity. Did you lose your kid? He asked bluntly. Rowan's breath caught. Elijah opened his mouth to correct his son, but Rowan beat him to it. Yes, he said softly. I did. And Toby, with all the innocence of a child who had seen loss but hadn't learned to hide from it, said, I hope you find him. Later that evening, Rowan walked the yard alone while Elijah watched from the porch. He stopped at the patch of dirt where Toby used to dig holes with a plastic shovel, bent down, picked up a toy car half buried in the mud. How do you do it? He asked when he came back. Elijah shrugged. Same way anybody does. One breath, then another. Rowan nodded like he understood, like those words had lived in his chest too. You've done more than you know. Elijah, he said quietly, you didn't just find a bike. You gave me a reason to keep going. Before he left, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a business card. Nothing fancy. There's a private investigator still working the case. He said, I'd like you to talk to him. Anything you remember. even if it seems small. Elijah agreed. The next day, the investigator called. His name was Marcus Lynn, polished voice, but sharp up as glass. Asked all the same questions again, but this time with more pressure. The woman at the yard sale, did she give you a name? Elijah hadn't thought to ask. You remember the house? Elijah described it best he could. Corner lot. Chipped blue paint. Wind chimes made of old silverware hanging from the porch. We'll find it, Marcus said. That bike's our thread. Mr. Ross. And threads lead somewhere. That night, Elijah felt something shift. He wasn't just part of the story anymore. He was inside it. Toby had questions too. Do you think the boy's okay? He asked from his bunk. Elijah hesitated. I think someone out there wants him to be. Toby nodded like that was enough. Maybe we're part of the plan, he whispered before drifting off to sleep. Elijah sat in the quiet afterward. The hum of the fridge and the ticking clock, the only sounds in the world. Outside, the sky was a deep navy, stars barely flickering through the clouds. And Elijah Ross, tired, broke, uncertain, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, not for himself, but for a boy he'd never met. A boy who, somehow, had ridden into his life on a second-hand bike and left behind a trail Elijah was now willing to follow to the end. Marcus Lynn worked fast. Within a week, he tracked down the yard sale house. Elijah got the call while fixing a busted shelf in the diner kitchen. Second job. Same story. We found her, Marcus said simply. Name's Elaine McCarthy. Retired school teacher. She's agreed to talk, but there's something you should know. Elijah wiped his hands on his apron and stepped outside into the alley. What's that? Marcus hesitated. She says the bike wasn't hers. It showed up in her nephew's storage shed 3 months ago when he moved back from the coast. Said it was junk from the house in Fremont. Elijah's pulse quickened. Fremont. That was less than 15 miles from where Oliver had vanished. You want me to talk to her? He asked. I think you should, Marcus said. Sometimes folks like her don't open up to guys like me. Elijah knew what that meant. Not everyone trusted suits, but a small-town dad in worn jeans and work boots. That was different. He drove to Elaine's the next morning. Little cottage at the edge of town. Wind chimes clinking on the porch. Same ones he'd seen before. She answered the door with a cautious smile. Her silver hair swept back and reading glasses perched atop her head like she'd just walked away from a crossword puzzle. You're the man with the boy, she said. The one who bought the bike. Elijah nodded. Yes, ma'am. I was hoping you could tell me more about where it came from. She invited him in, poured tea without asking, and sat across from him at a table cluttered with seed catalogs and a bowl of overripe peaches. My nephew, Kenny, brought it with him when he moved here. She explained. Said he got it from a house he was cleaning out. Belonged to a friend who moved overseas. Left everything behind. Elijah leaned forward. Did he say the friend's name? She squinted, trying to remember. Just that he worked in tech. Said the guy traveled a lot. Lived in Fremont. I didn't think much of it. The bike was just sitting there. Rusting. Thought someone else might want it. Elijah passed the details to Marcus that afternoon. The investigation shifted quickly. Within days, police in California raided the Fremont property. What they found shocked everyone. Hidden beneath a false floor in the garage was a stack of items tied directly to Oliver's disappearance. Photos, clothes, an old backpack. No child, but enough to reopen the case as an act of abduction. Elijah watched the news that night with Toby curled up beside him, popcorn in hand, neither fully understanding the storm that had just broken open. The anchor's voice was calm, detached. New developments in the 2021 disappearance of Oliver Ramsey have emerged this evening, thanks in part to a tip from a Montana father who unknowingly purchased a key piece of evidence at a local yard sale. The calls came fast after that. Reporters, detectives, even Rowan himself. Elijah declined the interviews. He wasn't in this for a spotlight. But when Rowan asked to fly him and Toby to California, something in Elijah said yes. Not out of curiosity, but because he needed to look that man in the eye and say, I did what I could. The trip was quiet. Toby had never been on a plane before. He pressed his face to the window and asked questions about clouds, wings, gravity, things Elijah didn't know how to answer but tried anyway. When they landed, a black car waited on the tarmac. No flashing cameras, just Rowan, standing beside it in a dark coat, eyes red-rimmed, jaw tight. He knelt as soon as Toby stepped out. Thank you, he said simply, for seeing what others didn't. They took them to a private house near the coast, gated, peaceful, filled with the kind of stillness that comes after too many empty holidays. Elijah walked the garden with Rowan, while Toby played in the yard. They think the man who lived in that Fremont house was using a fake name. Rowan explained, moved every year, always near schools, parks. He looked away. We don't know yet if Oliver was with him the whole time, or if he was moved again. But the bike, it proves he was there. It puts us on the trail again. Elijah didn't speak right away. Just watched Toby chase a butterfly near the roses, his laughter floating on the breeze. I hope you find him, he said softly. Rowan turned to him, eyes glassy. So do I. But then he added something Elijah didn't expect. And if we don't, at least now, I know someone still cared enough to notice. Elijah didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt right. Any dad would have done the same. Rowan shook his head. No, Elijah, that's where you're wrong. Most wouldn't have, but you did? And in that moment, two fathers stood side by side, one who had lost everything, and one who had almost nothing, bound not by blood, but by the stubborn hope that somehow, even the smallest act of goodness could tip the world back toward right. The days in California passed slowly, suspended between questions without answers and a hope no one dared speak aloud. Elijah and Toby stayed in the guest wing of Rowan's estate, a sunlit space bigger than their entire trailer back home. Toby explored the gardens and watched movies in a room with a screen bigger than any wall he'd ever seen. Elijah spent most of his time walking. The weight of everything pressed hard on his chest, not just the case, but what it stirred up inside him. Watching Rowan pace the halls, checking his phone every 5 minutes, taking calls behind closed doors, Elijah saw a reflection of something he didn't even realize lived in him. The fear of losing what you love, and the helplessness of not knowing how to stop it. One afternoon, while Rowan was in a meeting with the FBI, Elijah stepped into the boy's room, Oliver's room. Nothing had been touched. A model spaceship half built on the desk, a framed drawing of a father and son at a beach. The kind of mess only a kid can make, a chaos full of meaning. Elijah stood there, hand on the doorframe, and imagined his own son's room back home. The bunk bed with the loose screw, the sticker-covered dresser, the pencil marks on a wall tracking height like rings in a tree trunk. Different worlds, same heart. A boy who should have been there, a dad who couldn't stop waiting. That night, something shifted. Rowan got a call from the team in Fremont. They'd found a neighbor who remembered the man living there, said he often walked with a boy late at night, always bundled in hoodies. Face down, the boy didn't speak much. But once, the neighbor had offered him candy and asked his name. Ollie, the boy whispered. It was the break they needed. The team expanded the search zone, tapped into security footage from a nearby gas station where the man had been seen buying groceries. A shaky image showed a figure pushing a cart, and next to him, a child with tousled hair and a backpack with the same sticker from Oliver's missing poster. Rowan didn't sleep that night. Neither did Elijah. They sat outside, wrapped in the silence that only fathers can share. I always thought, Rowan said, voice low, that if we ever found something, I'd be ready. I'd feel relief. But now I just feel Scared. Elijah nodded. Hope is heavy when you haven't carried it in a while. The next morning, Elijah found Toby sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a bowl of cereal too fancy for either of them to pronounce. Dad, Toby asked, if that boy comes back, where will he go? Will he remember his dad? Elijah sat beside him, thinking carefully. I don't know, Bud. But even if he doesn't remember everything, I think love finds its way back. Toby nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Then added, maybe you were supposed to find that bike, so he could come home. Elijah looked at him, heart swelling in that quiet way only a parent knows. Maybe so, he said. Maybe so. Later that day, Rowan called everyone into the study. The FBI had confirmed a sighting. A small town outside Sacramento. A security guard at a train station had recognized the man from the posters. Said he was with a boy who looked tired, confused, but safe. A sting operation was underway. No promises. No timelines. But it was happening. Rowan's hands shook as he put the phone down. This might be it, he whispered. This might actually be it. Elijah didn't say a word. He just stood by, ready. That night, Rowan asked Elijah to stay. No matter how this turns out, he said, you're a part of this now. And Elijah, who had come from a trailer in Montana with nothing but a $5 bill and a beat-up truck, realized something for the first time in years. Maybe being broke wasn't the same as being empty. Maybe doing the right thing, quietly, without fanfare, was enough to make you matter. Not to the world, maybe, but to someone, and sometimes, that someone is the one who needs you most. Even if you've never met, even if they don't know your name. They found him 2 days later in a motel room off Route 58, a rundown place with flickering neon and carpets that hadn't seen a vacuum in years. The man, who the FBI confirmed had been living under 3 aliases, was arrested without resistance. Oliver was found sitting on the edge of a twin bed, knees pulled to his chest, clutching a toy car that once belonged in his father's office. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But when the agents called his name, his head lifted slowly. And in that moment, Rowan's world started breathing again. Elijah wasn't there for the recovery. He got the news from Marcus, who called just after dawn. We got him, he said, voice breaking for the first time since they'd met. He's safe. Elijah stood on the patio, the ocean breeze cool against his skin, and let the words settle into him like sunlight after a storm. He turned to find Toby still asleep, arms tangled in the blankets, his chest rising steady and slow. For the first time in weeks, Elijah felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. Later that afternoon, Rowan returned to the house. He didn't say much, just nodded when Elijah opened the door, then walked inside like a man trying to remember how to stand without fear holding him up. He sat down heavily in the armchair, face pale, hands trembling. He's thinner, quieter, Rowan said. But he's alive. He's really alive. Elijah poured him a cup of coffee, neither of them mentioning how his hands shook as he held the mug. He asked about his bike. Rowan added with a small smile. Said it was the one thing that made him feel like himself, even when he was scared. Elijah felt something catch in his throat. It was always meant to come home, he said. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the cliffs, Rowan invited Elijah and Toby to meet Oliver. Only if you're comfortable, he said gently. Elijah didn't hesitate. We'd be honored. When they arrived at the private recovery facility, Oliver stood by the window, dressed in a soft blue hoodie and jeans too big for his frame. His eyes were wary but curious. Toby approached first, hands stuffed in his pockets, and said simply, Hey, I rode your rocket bike. Oliver's lips twitched, a near smile, and then, like they'd always known each other, the boys sat side by side, shoulders touching. No words needed. Rowan stepped beside Elijah, voice quiet with awe. You didn't just help find my son. You reminded me what hope looks like. Elijah shook his head. I just bought a bike. But Rowan placed a hand on his shoulder. No, you listened when most wouldn't. And in that quiet room, with two boys side by side and two fathers standing behind them, something unspoken passed between them. A bond not built on wealth or luck, but on the simple, stubborn belief that even the smallest kindness can lead someone home. They flew home the next morning. The plane was quieter than the one that brought them in. The sky outside a soft canvas of gold and gray. Toby pressed his forehead to the window, watching clouds roll past like slow-moving waves. Elijah sat beside him, coffee in hand, mind still turning over everything that had happened. He kept thinking about Oliver's face, that flicker of recognition when Toby mentioned the bike, the way his shoulders relaxed just a little when they sat side by side. It wasn't a miracle in the way movies show it. It was quiet, tender, real, and somehow that made it more powerful. When they landed back in Montana, the cold felt sharper, the air cleaner. Life returned to its usual rhythm: early mornings, stacked shifts, overdue bills. But something had changed. The neighbors who barely nodded before now lingered a little longer at the mailbox. Folks left casseroles on the porch. A new bike showed up one day, brand new and shiny, with a note that read simply, "For Toby, from someone who believes in second chances." Elijah didn't ask who sent it. He didn't need to. A few weeks later, a package arrived. Inside was a photo. Oliver and Toby standing side by side in the garden, arms slung over each other's shoulders like brothers. Beneath it, a handwritten note from Rowan. There are people who change the world quietly. Elijah, you're one of them. Elijah held the photo for a long time. Then he slipped it into a frame and placed it on the windowsill above the sink. Every morning after that, as the coffee brewed and the house stirred awake, he looked at it and remembered, not just the boy who came home, but the moment one small act of kindness brought two lives, two families, back into the light. Sometimes, the smallest acts, the ones that seem like nothing at the time, are the ones that change everything. Elijah didn't go looking for recognition. He wasn't chasing headlines or rewards. He was just a father doing the best he could, trying to bring a little joy to his son with a $5 bike. But that simple act of love uncovered a story bigger than he ever imagined. It brought a missing child home. It reminded a grieving father that hope still lives in unexpected places. And it showed us all that you don't have to be wealthy, powerful, or perfect to make a difference. You just have to care. In a world that often feels loud and divided, stories like this remind us of what really matters: kindness, connection, and the courage to act when your heart tells you something isn't right. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not in the rescue itself, but in the fact that one man chose to pay attention. One man chose to follow his gut. And because of that, a child got a second chance at home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that there's still good in this world, consider following us for more real-life stories that inspire hope and remind us that we all have the power to make a difference. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that miracles don't always shout, they whisper. And sometimes, all it takes to hear one is listening.